listening to the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast with your host, Andy Plimer. Bringing you up-to-date coaching concepts from the world of rugby. Sharing ideas to make the game better.
All right, welcome to episode number 63 of the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast. I'm your host, Andy Plimer, and joining me today is Daniel Ritchie. Daniel is the Director of Rugby at Brisbane State High School in Queensland, Australia. He spent his playing days at Norths Rugby Club in Brisbane, as well as a few years at Falkirk Rugby Club in Scotland, and a one-year stint as a player coach for Meraloma Rugby Club in Vancouver here in Canada. Along with his coaching and teaching duties at BSHS, he was manager of the Brisbane City U19 team that won the inaugural URC National U19 carnival. It's a pleasure to have him on the show, so welcome, Daniel.
Thanks very much, Andy. It's massive honour to have been asked. Like I said, I really enjoy every episode and I've learnt so much, so really humbled to have had the invite, so thanks very much for that.
Yeah, no worries. Well, you can thank Stuart Lyric for that. He gave you a shout out when I chatted to him, and ever since then I've been kind of doing a bit of Twitter stalking to see what's going on in your life. So say thanks to Stu when you see him next.
He's a good bloke, Stu. I appreciate that.
No worries. So we touched on it a bit there. What's you played most of your rugby with Norths Rugby Club in Brisbane. What's a bit of a story of your playing days during that time?
I guess like everyone sort of in Australia, you start playing when you get to high school, sort of in a more serious context, I guess. Mm-hmm. So I went to a school in Brisbane called Padua College, which is a bit of a rugby league sort of nursery.
Right.
You know, it's produced like David Shillington, Fatty Vorton, Dane Carlaw, Brad Watts, Lindsay Collins, who's recently in the Roosters grand final team. So it was probably more known for rugby league guys, but I sort of learnt my rugby there. I was fortunate enough to have a coach called Brett Piccone, who's pretty well known in Brisbane club circles at the moment as a coach, and he sort of he really, I guess, instilled or inspired that passion. So I finished school and just did the natural thing, go down to your junior club or your local club, which was Norths, and my grandfather, my dad, my uncle had all played first grade there, so it was a bit of a natural progression. Worked my way up through the Colts there and was lucky enough to play a bit of Premier grade. I was caught behind a couple of handy players for a few seasons, so I really had to work for it. But there was a guy that probably on your side of the world, and you're probably pretty familiar with, Shalom Suniula, who's the American Sevens captain. Like his skill set's just unbelievable. So it was I guess bittersweet playing behind him. He was an exceptional player. I was lucky enough to get an opportunity to play Premier grade, and following that, got an opportunity. Something I'd always sort of wanted to do was travel the world, I guess, through rugby, and I got an opportunity to do that in Scotland at Falkirk with three of my other mates from Norths, which was really good, and had a wonderful 2 years there. Learned so much, and it was a small town, so rugby wasn't, I guess, the top sport there. Football's pretty dominant in the central belt of Scotland, but the local boys just took us under our wing and looked after us so much, and it was a real sort of family sort of vibe. Everyone was sort of similar sort of ages, and it was, like I said, a really great period. And then, lucky enough to get an opportunity to go to Meraloma in Vancouver as a sort of player coach, and again, Kitsilano Beach, beautiful, beautiful part of the world. And, the local boys, again, sort of took us under our wing. I was lucky enough my younger brother's 6 years younger than me, so you're sort of never really sure if you get an opportunity to play with him. But we were fortunate enough that Meraloma allowed that to happen. So that's probably
cool. That's awesome.
The highlight. Yeah, being able to play with my younger brother in Canada, which was really, really good. And, we coached in the local schools there and with the juniors, and it's just, it was really good.
Sweet. So, and was that your first coaching experience, or were you coaching before that in Falkirk, or how did you first kind of get into the coaching role, and what were those kind of early experiences like?
I guess studying to be a teacher, you sort of naturally sort of fall into coaching.
Yeah.
So I probably started about 19 back at the old school at Padua and started with the mighty grade fives.
Oh, yeah.
And
Beauty.
it's look, I think it's really, you all sort of look back and cringe on, your first sort of coaching experiences, but I
Yeah.
think starting there really does have its place because,
Mm.
you go in with all these elaborate ideas and, these flashy backline moves and whatever, but when you finally understand that, they're 10 years old and it's not the World Cup, you really develop the ability to simplify things really well. And I actually had so much fun coaching that year. And it's funny enough, there's a boy in that team called Tom O'Toole who is playing for Ulster in Ireland at the moment.
Oh,
and
sweet.
he's probably not far off playing for Ireland, but he was he was quite a big, overgrown grade five boy who had lots of skill, lots of talent, and it's just funny. Like you look back and you go, "Geez, that was him as a 10-year-old, and here he is running around in the Pro 14 for Ulster." And I'm sure it won't be too long. He's played for the Ireland under 20s as well. So yeah, it's just funny when you look back on that. But so yeah, I did that at Padua. I picked up a couple of I guess Brisbane sort of club rep coaching gigs along the way while you're playing, and then I sort of I worked as a boarding master for a bit at one of the great rugby nurseries in Australia, Nudgee College, and
Yeah, of course.
that was sort of that was really eye opening as far as what GPS rugby is, and just how much of a religion rugby is in some places, and so I really sort of immersed myself there a bit as well. And then when I finally got my first teaching job, we took that particular team down to the Armidale School Carnival in Country as well. Is that where you're from, Annie?
Yeah,
Armidale?
well, I spent a couple of years there. I actually, after talking to Nick Lay, I said I lived like 4 blocks away from Taz. I actually looked it up on Google Maps, and I lived 1 block away. It was right kind of in my backyard there, but I was in grade 2, 3, and 4 there, so I didn't really. I was a leaguey back then, so I didn't really understand the.
Yeah, it's a beautiful campus. But yeah, they have a pretty prominent primary schools, I guess under 12 type carnival. So
Right.
so took a team down there, and we'd sort of done I guess a mini sort of prep preseason type thing for it, and we ended up winning the carnival, and I think it was there that the penny probably dropped a bit there. I was like, oh, actually, I quite like this coaching, and it's really good seeing something you've put a bit of effort into come to fruition a bit. So yeah, that was probably where the penny first dropped.
Yeah.
And ironically, it was at that carnival where I sort of found out that I'd had an opportunity to go and play overseas later that year. So ironically, I left halfway through that year, but sort of always maintained contact with a couple of families and kids from that team, and even now sort of still in contact. So yeah, that was probably the first time it really sort of clicked with me. And then obviously overseas, I think in Scotland the coaching development is done exceptionally well there. And once you're sort of around that, I guess things really sort of started snowballing a bit. And okay, I could really get used to this. So yeah, that's where it started, I guess.
What were some of the things in Scotland that you noticed that they were doing really well in terms of coach development?
Oh, I think on any given weekend, probably out of season, there was always some form of masterclass on, from the Edinburgh or Glasgow coaches, or people were really open to sharing. And I just think the structure of, their level 2 and 3 courses, which is probably standard, in most places around the world now. But at that time, I really thought it was just really thorough and well done. And I guess there's probably a lot more coaching opportunities there in clubland, probably compared to, I guess, Brisbane. But at the time, I remember thinking, I'm learning quite a lot, and I guess the feedback and mentoring, I guess, that they seem to give a lot of young coaches over there is done really well.
Oh, that's cool. That's something that people could learn from for sure. And I think that mentoring point, like like we've all had some horror shows of sessions and our performance on the sideline during games, and I think that mentoring piece is key. And if you have someone who you can lean on or who can kind of tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, what's a bit of a review of that session or that game, that's going to accelerate your learning as a coach for sure.
Yeah, the mentoring thing is something I'm a big believer in, and something that you try and seek someone out as much as you can, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. So I talked a little bit about your evolution there as a coach. What have been some like key kind of turning points in your coaching career so far? You mentioned Nudgy there, but apart from that, what would come at some of the key kind of, I don't know, people you met, books you read, situations in sessions or games that you feel really changed you as a coach, and where'd you go from there?
I think early on, like I said a bit earlier, I think I was very, like everyone, you get really excited about, flashy systems or set plays
Mm,
or, things like that. So I think as time's gone on and, you hopefully have become a bit wiser, you realise just how important the focus on basic skills and defence especially is.
mm-hmm.
So that's something I've really sort of, I guess, changed a lot. And I
So
guess now...
you're saying under 10 kids can't do 1-3-3-1?
Yeah, no, probably not. No.
Okay, good. All right, sorry, go on.
Yeah. But I think the biggest one now, and I think being a teacher, you probably know this as well, but I think that man management and communication with players of this particular generation, I think is just so important. So I really try and make a really conscious effort to, check in with players, be thorough with feedback, but also try and take the emotion out of, when you got to drop
Mm,
someone who, just tries their backside off. But also, I think communication with, assistant coaches or, the team underneath you's coaches, that's something that I think is just so important as well, because if a player's going down, you've got to make sure that the same message is received to them from both sets of coaches. And
mm-hmm.
obviously you've got to try and develop the other coaches that you're with as well. So yeah, communication, and so everyone knows what they're doing, so no one treads on each other's toes or is confused.
Mm,
So yeah, I think that that communication between both your existing staff and your players is something that I've made a really conscious effort to improve. But you were saying about people I've met, and I think the biggest thing is you continue to learn. But in my first teaching job, I worked with a bloke called Damien Reedy, who has he's been a massive mentor for me, a massive impact on me, and
cool.
he coached in the Brisbane competition in the 90s and had quite a lot of success. And he'd gone from sort of schoolboy rugby into club rugby, and then he spent 7 years coaching in Scotland as their sort of premiership up there, or the Premier One it was called then.
Mm-hmm.
And he was one who was really he really encouraged me to spend some time there and to go there. And he actually, when he was coaching Scotland, he actually used to send a lot of his Scottish players to Norths, and so there was sort of a bit of a connection there before I'd actually met him. But we would sit there for probably 2 years every day at lunchtime and just talk rugby and coaching.
Cool.
And he'd met some really influential people in Scotland, and I think he was the only sort of foreign coach at that time in the premiership, so I think he had a bit of a following there as well. And but yeah, so we would sit there, and he, it's funny, I guess now people sort of think that the longer coaches go, especially as they get older, that sometimes they might not stay current with the game, but he's probably one person that has always stayed really current with the game. So that continually learning from people and picking people's brains is something I've always tried to do, probably to the point of annoying some people, I'd reckon, but like
Yeah,
we
I
all
think,
do. But
yeah, I think I don't know, I've talked about it before on the show, like, I that's part of the reason why I started the podcast, was like, I just love talking about rugby, and I think there's a certain level of, I don't know, humility is not the right word, but you've just got to kind of accept that you don't know everything about the game, and that there might be someone out there, and there definitely is someone out there who knows way more than you about it, and your job as a coach or of the players around you is to find that person to make your players better. So I think it's a key thing for coaching, is just like to constantly grow, because once you stop doing that, you may as well be running water,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's also a really enjoyable part too when you sort
Mm,
of take a little thing that oh actually I've never thought of that before. So that's
mm.
they're things I really like as well. But yeah, you're spot on. The minute you think you know it all, yeah, you probably are better off just running water, aren't you?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. Okay, so you're currently the director of rugby at BSHS, as I mentioned in the intro. Tell us a little bit about the school and the history of the rugby program there, and how'd you come across that role, and for those who aren't familiar with GPS rugby in Queensland, what's the setup like there?
So I've been at State Off for 2 years now.
Hmm.
So yeah, I was sort of came back playing, and I was sort of probably not enjoying it as much as I used to, and found myself probably analysing the training session itself rather than my individual job. So
Yeah.
I guess the penny sort of dropped a bit there that maybe my playing days were coming to an end. But the school I was at the time, I was sort of approached by a couple of grade 11 students at the time who were playing the first 15, and we'd won that Armidale Carnival
Mm.
years before, and they sort of said, the first 15 job's going to be up at the end of the season. Would you put your hat in the ring for it? And at that point, they'd won, I think, 2 games in 3 years. And
Right.
so they were sort of, these kids were really passionate about the game, and they were real students of the game. And I just had so much time for them. And I sort of felt for them a bit. They sort of, they wanted a bit of a change. And so a good mate and I, we sort of put an application together, did a bit of a 3-year plan, and we'd sort of worked in development squads before that, so we were pretty
Hmm.
confident we knew what we had to work with and how we would go about things and all the rest of it. And anyway, so we went through the process, and we weren't successful, and they'd reappointed the existing coaches, and that was obviously disappointing, but
Mm.
that's what happens sometimes. And so we sort of sat there and thought, oh, we can kick cans for a bit, or we can just get on with it. And funny enough, about 3 weeks later, I got a phone call from the state high director of rugby, and he sort of said, look, our first coaches are moving on. I'm probably going to slide into that role. The Brisbane rugby community is pretty small
Hmm.
when you're sort of in it, I guess. And he sort of said, oh, I heard you might be looking to move. And at that time, I probably wasn't, but I spoke to a lot of people that I trust, and they sort of said, yeah, look, I think you should definitely think about it. So in the end, I accepted the job. About 5-6 weeks later, and um, it was a great opportunity when it came up, and it was
Hmm.
actually on the back. State had actually just won the first 15 premiership the year before, so
Right.
no pressure to come
Yeah.
in on that,
No, exactly.
but yeah, so yeah, I've been here 2 years and just absolutely love it. But the school itself, so the GPS competition in Brisbane is like it is a massive beast. It is super competitive.
Mm.
The programs that every school runs are just of such a really high standard, and a lot of time and energy goes into it. And I guess we're probably a bit unique in that all the other schools are private schools and
Right.
boys' schools.
Yeah.
So we're I guess a selective entry public school with a very, very high academic focus. But also the I guess sporting aspect of the school it's really proud, and it's got a really rich rugby history. So there's 3,200 students at the school, so it's the
Right.
biggest school in
Wow.
Queensland. But it's very, very well known for its academic prowess and its sporting history. So State High won, I think, first 15 premierships.
Okay.
And there was probably the most famous team is in 2009,
Right.
and they had 11 Australian schoolboys that year, and they're arguably talked about as the most dominant schoolboy side of the past decade.
Wow.
Just the scores they put on teams that year, and interestingly enough, so Chris Sortier, who he's played for the Wallabies and he's
Hmm.
been in the Reds, probably not as much as he would like to. So he was a grade 10 student in that side.
Okay.
There was Paul Alomil, who plays for Samoa, and he plays for Stade Francais in France at the moment.
Okay.
And a guy called Curtis Browning, who was in the Red system for a
Yeah.
bit, and now he plays at Lyon.
Hmm.
So that was probably one of our most famous sides. There were a couple of really, really good teams in the early 90s as well. So we've got, I think, the second most amount of Australian schoolboy reps from all the schools in Queensland. So that's currently at 63, which is something we're really proud of. Last year's class produced Jordan Pataya, who's going really well for the Reds and for Queensland Country and NRC, and I dare say he'll probably be half a chance of going on the Wallaby Spring Tour at the end of the year. So he was in Year 12 last year, and he's just exceptional talent. And just being able to watch him, just watching him play every week it's just a real privilege. And so we had him, and then we had last year Moses Aluamil. He's over at Stud Frontsay at the moment, and our other prop, Clinton Malalula, plays for the Hino Red Dolphins in Japan at the moment. So we had 3 boys from last year who are in professional systems within a year out of school, which is it's a really nice thing for boys and families to be able to see these kids go on to things at such a young age. But some of our great Wallabies, Peter Slattery, probably arguably our best Wallaby, Matt Tamua of recent times, Paul Carozza, Samu Karevi, and then even for other countries. So we had the Jacob and Moses Rialini played for Fiji that went through the school. We've got Willie Tupou and a guy called James Moore who are in the Japanese train-on squad at the moment. Willie's played about 8 or 9 tests for Japan and obviously for the Sunwolves as well. And then for, I guess, cricket tragics, I guess, big cricket fans will know Ian Healy and Michael Kasrovich pretty well.
Legends. Cool.
So obviously Ian Healy, one of the greatest wicket keepers of all time. So he was actually a flanker in the first 15 at State High in the 80s.
That's fantastic. That's where he gets his edge from.
Absolutely, I'm told he was a very ferocious flanker. And then Michael Kasrovich, funny enough, so he was an Australian schoolboy rugby union player.
He was an 8, wasn't he? Was he? I think I heard that somewhere. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and then in that same year, representing Australian schoolboys, before that year ended, he was playing first-class cricket for the Bulls.
Amazing.
So, and that's, State High's sort of known for, I guess, these, back then and probably the 80s and 90s, these multi-sport guys who, could have tried their hand at anything and been successful. So, the rich history is what I really like about the place. And I guess in the role I'm in now, trying to connect the past with the present is something I really enjoy seeing come together, particularly when you rattle off some of those names, you sort of go, wow, that's, it's pretty cool. But I mean, every school in the GPS has got that, everyone's got a proud tradition and history of producing players, and that's what's really cool about the competition as well. You can go to any field on a Saturday, and not only will there be lots of students and parents there, but there'll also be the former students that have gone through and come back, and that's really good. Like you go to Nudgee and there's Sean McMahon presenting jerseys and things like that. So that's, like I said, that's a real feature of the competition, is these guys want to give back because the schools gave them so many opportunities to be where they are now. So it's that giving back is a really nice sentiment in the competition.
Cool. Yeah. So you mentioned there, like it's most of GPS rugby is private boys' schools. So you as a state high school, co-ed high school, it's a co-ed high school, is that right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So that's obviously got some challenges, but also some strengths. What are some of those, and how do you kind of tap into them from a coaching point of view to really kind of emphasize them?
Well, look, we might have 3,200 students, but because there's so much of a landscape of things that go on in the school, rugby's just one of many things that go on in the school. So we only have about 230 boys that play rugby.
Right.
So that equates to about 12 teams. So an A and a B team in sort of each year level, whereas every other school probably has, anywhere between 4 and 7 sort of teams in an age group. We don't have the playing numbers, and we tend to have I guess a bit of a gap between our top end kids who have, played a lot of rugby or rugby league, and, mixing them in with kids that have never played before or played very limited rugby. So, when you've only got 2 teams in an age group, you've got to be really conscious of upskilling those kids who are newer to the game, but also extending those top end kids and keeping them engaged and making sure sort of, they don't get bored and, but they're obviously making sure that they're developing as well. So that's a good challenge, I think, from a coaching perspective. But with that also comes, we don't pay coaches. So we have to engage what I call good rugby people. But we have parents, we have old boys, we have some staff, and then we just have people who, might be pretty aspirational and want to be a part of something. So they give up 5 months of their time, like you would in club rugby, I guess.
Yeah.
So that can be a challenge because sometimes you have a bit of a turnover of coaches, which naturally happens. But I think that the staff that we got this year was just incredible. We had a mix of people that have coached premier grade, underage rep staff, school teams in the past, things like that. So we have a good range of coaches. I guess the selective entry part to the school that probably allows us to be competitive. And when you're doing that, you've got to make sure that obviously the students are a good fit for the school and that the school's a good fit for them. And as I said, we've got a very high academic focus, which I think really allows us to turn out sort of really well-rounded young. We, from a school perspective and a rugby perspective, we really drive high standards around conduct and uniform appearances and having a balance as well with studies. So it's really good. And in terms of, when they finish, they sort of, I guess for the guys at that top end, you hope that, if there's an opportunity for them to go on and play professional rugby, that's one avenue, but also, the university pathway or the, job prospect pathway as well as, hopefully that we've done enough as a school that when they finish that they'll be successful in whatever they want to do. So that's a really good part of it as well.
Cool. Well, you mentioned, a relatively high turnover of coaching staff there year to year. What have been some of the strategies that you found have been helpful to kind of assist with that when you have a new person coming in?
I think, constant communication and checking in with them and, seeing how you can support them in what they do. And I mean, most of the coaches that do come in that have, pretty experienced, they don't need a lot of help and support. They're pretty self-sufficient. But I think it's important to make sure they feel like they're looked after and valued. And in a small program, when you've only got 12 teams, that's probably pretty easy to do than probably some of the bigger programs on a more regular basis. Just trying to make sure that they feel really part of it. And I think as well when they come in and see the kids and they are great kids, and I think when they see how they perform on a weekend and just their conduct, I think that's also a bit of a draw card that they're working with good kids as well. So that's probably about all the arsenal you have really to try and keep them that, and a couple of good polo shirts and caps and that. We all love kit, don't we?
Yeah,
so,
no doubt.
You try and look after them that way.
Sweet. Yeah, and I couldn't talk more about that as well. Like having kids who are focused and disciplined and listen. Like the school I'm at is exactly like that. When the coach talks, they're listening and they're ready to go. They turn up on time, and it makes all the difference. It takes if you can take the discipline and the behavior management out of coaching for coaches who are not teachers day to day, you're gonna make their lives a whole lot more enjoyable. And more often than not, the school drives those kind of values and like you said, the kids you recruit or the kids who enter that school kind of fit the school, so it makes the job a whole lot easier for the coach.
Absolutely. And, some schools subscribe to, only wanting teachers to, coach A teams and things like that. And that has its place because, you probably engage the kids a bit better because you're seeing them day to day as well as, after school at training. But like you say, if the school, is the ones driving that culture of discipline and respect and things like that, it probably doesn't matter who comes in and coaches them and, how much contact time they have with them if all that foundation is set in the school grounds, which is, certainly what we try and work towards. But, as not to have a blanket rule to say that, only teachers can coach, it's not really realistic, is it?
No,
because
no.
you can have the PE teacher who's a great bloke and, I'll look after that team. But, if they can't provide that technical and detailed sort of coaching, then, the kids sort of, don't matter how good a bloke they are, they probably, if they don't feel like they're learning something, they tend to disengage a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. All right, cool. So, what's your day-to-day work look like as director of rugby at BSHS? You got obviously teaching duties along with coaching duties. How's that play out?
Yeah, so I've got a full teaching load. So I
Yep.
teach maths and science to year 8,
Okay.
which is pretty demanding. But around that, you're doing anything from, term 1, you're sort of setting up your first 15 sort of squad preseason with that coaching staff. Term 2, you're doing everyone's sort of preseason, making sure they're prepared and training, trial games, things like that. And then term 3, you're in the season. So in the season, week to week, I've got like a checklist, and you go through everything. Have I collated results? Have I got the fixtures sorted for this week? Have I got the referees sorted for the home games?
Yeah.
Have I got the first aid sorted? So you're sort of going through those sort of logistical things. But also I do sort of a mini review at the start of the week to all the coaches and just go, great results over the weekend. These teams were victorious. Over what I observed on the weekend, these are some areas I think we should focus on at training this week. We've got this particular school this weekend who, they're always going to be very good at the breakdown. So we've got to make sure that, our ball presentation is on point, and our effectiveness at the breakdown or something like that. So you sort of send that out, but I don't try and be too prescriptive to our coaches. I sort of, let them run their own show. But so you're doing that, responding to emails from parents, which, as you know, Andy, is a real perk of teaching sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
So dealing with that and justifying little Johnny's selection in the B team and things like that. But fortunately, I don't get too much of that, which is quite nice. And fingers crossed it stays that way. But and then the other side to that week to week is one of the bits I really enjoy of the role is. Coaching is what I like, and so I coordinate and coach the under 13 age group.
Oh, great!
And so I really enjoy that because they're so enthusiastic, and they're new to the school, so you sort of when they come in, you sort of try and look after them and set them in good habits, and then pass them on to someone else. So and the group I work with this year were they're a really good group, a real funny group as well. But they knew where the game switch was and things like that. So it was never boring. That's for sure. But so that's a nice little sort of mini out for me, I guess, from all the logistics and admin, and some programs within GPS are so big that the director doesn't really get a chance to do much coaching because there's so much day-to-day logistics stuff. So again, being in a smaller program, it does allow me to still do a fair bit of coaching, which I really enjoy as well.
Yeah, well, I think that's key. I think if anyone follows kind of Stuart Lancaster's career, like his big thing about going back to Leinster was I just want to coach again, and I think if you just step away too much from coaching and into that managerial role, you lose touch of why you were there for the first place, and it's you love the contact with the athletes, and you love the game, and you love the the strategy and the fun of upskilling athletes. So I think that's great that you're doing that and making sure you do that.
And I guess what you're saying there with Stuart going from England to Leinster, and it probably really showed in his season with Leinster, and
Sure.
and just he seemed like he was probably not as on edge as you would being a head coach of England. So you're absolutely right. That's sort of why you do it in the first place. Sometimes as you move up, you get less opportunities to do that hands-on stuff.
Yeah, so you're moving on. Then you mentioned you had a couple of good teams this year. You had a really successful season. Give us a bit of a summary of what kind of success the school had, and what do you think were some of the key ingredients to that success?
So we were lucky enough to win and share a couple of premierships in the juniors. So our 12A, 13A, 14A, and 15A teams all won premierships, which was really pleasing and fantastic results. Three of those were shared premierships, which gives you an idea of how competitive all those competitions are. So only one of our teams were undefeated premiers. So that's the thing with school seasons, because they're so short. Every weekend's a grand final.
Right.
So you need so many things to go your way to win a comp, and we were lucky enough this year that we had a few things go away. So from various times in the season, so our under 12s and our under 15s, for example, there's a bit of a representative competitions that go on during the season. So sometimes if you provide a lot, and all the other schools are in the same boat, but if you provide a large amount of players to some rep teams, means you're disadvantaged a little bit on a Saturday. So the under 12s and under 15s is quite hard. So there were weeks where we were missing anywhere between 4 and 8 really key players in those teams, and like I say, other schools are in the same boat as well. So you need that to sort of fall your way, and obviously injuries, particularly with things like concussions and head knocks, like to miss 2 games in a 9-game season is a lot. So you need that to fall your way. So we had a bit of good fortune with that. But like our under 14s, for example, by the end of it, they had 12 players in the age group out. 8 of those were A players. So you really do, and depth obviously with us is probably not as thorough, but it's sort of an all hands on deck type thing. So we were fortunate enough in those areas to sort of get through there. But I think the big reason we were successful in the juniors this year was the coaches that we had. Like I say, just good rugby people that had been engaged, and some people didn't even have a connection to the school. And across the whole competition in GPS, there's excellent coaches, particularly at first 15 level. And the people that we got this year, they were brilliant. They did a great job with the kids, engaged them really well, and just instill basic fundamentals and let the boys do the rest, sort of thing, which is quite good. So that I think was good. The other thing too we did was, as I said earlier, engaging sort of those old boys and getting them to understand what it means to play for State High and what that crest means, and the people that have gone before them as well. Like we had a guy called Josh Afu, who Josh played 16, 17 tests for Tonga, and had a pretty good career in England and France and Japan, and he's now a development officer at the Reds. And when he got that job, he sort of got in contact, and he spoke at our preseason launch, and what he gave them, and what he spoke about how much State High gave him as well. It sort of really sort of rammed home to the boys. I've got a really big opportunity going to a school like this. So just trying to get them to understand, what it means. Same with our first 15 jersey presentations this year. Some of the people we had this year, and unfortunately with my day-to-day activities on a Saturday, I don't always get to see the jersey presentations, but we had like Jacob Raulini came in, Peter Slattery came in, guys like that who were played at the highest level, who wore the same uniform and same jerseys as these boys. I think it slowly sunk in what it means, and I think that was probably really reflected in a lot of our teams winning close games, because they play for each other, and they have a better understanding of what it means.
Yeah, that's cool. And by the sounds of it, it creates a good healthy depth chart moving forward. If you've got all those teams you mentioned were younger age grades, so that's going to push through to your first 15.
Yeah, hopefully. But, like I said, the competition is just so competitive, and, everyone puts so much time into their programs that, you can't get complacent at all. It's funny when you go through the other schools, and some of the caliber of people coaching their teams is just incredible. And that's probably why the competition produces, so many brilliant athletes. So, you've got guys like Shane Drum, who, played for England and the Reds. You got Phil Mooney, who coached the Reds. You got Andrew Scottney, who's done a lot in Japan, and in Australia. Paul Warwick, who had a very distinguished career at Munster. You got Todai Kefu. Guys like that are coaching the next generation of people coming through. And even with our first 15 coaches, our boys are so fortunate to have these type of people. So our head coach, for example, so Pat Byron, so he was Eddie Jones's assistant at Suntory for 4 years, and I think anyone who can survive 4 years under Eddie must have some pretty redeeming qualities.
No doubt.
And he's a teacher on staff, and he's an old boy, so again, it means a lot to him. And then we've got Mark Bartholomew's, who you talk about the great Australian rugby era, and he was part of those Brumbies sides that were so successful. And he's a third generation State High student himself, and he's got 4 daughters who are all going to come to the school as well. So wow, he's an old boy first. He's a parent, and he's a former international, and just the knowledge and wisdom that he imparts on our boys is just top quality. And then we've got Fletcher Dyson as well, who obviously played for the Wallabies in the front row, and he's a parent as well. And these guys, they do it for nothing, and they're just, like I say, that they've got a link to the school as either a former student or a parent, and what they're passing on to our kids is just high quality. And I know our boys really benefit from it. And like I say, across all schools, the quality of coaching is just exceptional. So yeah, you can't get ahead of yourself at all. But yeah, certainly celebrate the success. But yeah, you got to continue to work hard.
No, that's cool. It's a pretty good crew you got there by the sounds of it. That's pretty exciting. So you're, as I mentioned again in the intro, you're also involved in a under-19 rep program this year. Tell us a little bit about that, and what are the hopes for some of the athletes moving forward in that program, and a little bit also about the genesis of that program.
Yeah, so the URC, as it's known, was the National Under-19 Carnival this year, and it was I guess billed originally as being the NRC but for under-19s. But what they did was the tournament ran for a week down in Canberra, and everyone was sort of placed in the AIS, and it was such a brilliant concept, and it's probably something that Australian rugby's needed for quite some time, because I guess the landscape of picking the Australian under-20s team previously had been so difficult, and there's so many arguments about what's the best model. And I think what they did here, where they picked it at the end of the club season, there were 2 teams from Queensland, 2 from New South Wales, 1 from Canberra, Melbourne, Perth, and then a Barbarian side for people that they may have missed out on some of those other teams. So cool. They really cast the net far and wide, which was really good. And with the team that we were in, Brisbane City, we actually had a number of guys who had played seconds or thirds at school, and were sort of late bloomers. Right. And cool. some of those guys are now going to be in the wider Australian under-20s training squad. So awesome. It really gave boys an opportunity who may not have been on the radar, so to speak, at school, and were rewarded for obviously staying in rugby, playing club rugby, and getting opportunities and rewards through doing that. So it was a brilliant carnival. It was really well run, and the group that we had was just sensational, and that probably played a really big part in why we were successful, and the coaching staff. So and again, something that Queensland Rugby did really well was they stipulated that the 2 Queensland teams had to be coached by Premier grade coaches from Brisbane. So again, these boys were getting well coached, and it was also I guess a bit of a pathway for the Premier grade coaches as well. So yeah, I think what they've done and how they've changed that landscape of the Australian under-20 selection is just really, really good. So I guess the outcomes of that now is, they're in the process of, or have named, I think, a 60-man train-on squad that will attend a series of camps, and then they'll eventually cut that for the Junior World Cup next year. But the other side to that is, that guys may have missed out on the Australian under-20s squad initially, but they can be added in at any time. But they can also be added to one of the state academies now, which again I think is really good. So yeah, there were lots of key outcomes from that carnival, and it's only going to get better. It was in its first year, but it's only going to get better each year, I think. And it's just, like I say, I think there probably used to be a bit of a perception that, if I wasn't seen at school, I sort of have missed the boat a bit. So this really does reward, the toilers in club rugby who might be a bit of a late bloomer or just needed an opportunity. So, brilliant carnival. They did such a great job, and it'd be interesting to see how it goes and how it translates into results for the junior Wallabies next year.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I think it's a if rugby's anything, it's a late specialisation sport. So this has got to be the route you go when it comes to athlete identification. So I think that's huge, and there'd be even people who miss out on that U20 kind of window that then. Someone like Scott Fardy, for example, never played age grade rep, but is arguably the best six going around for that should be selected for a Wallaby jersey. So I think that's a good strategy. And you were there as a manager, but no doubt you had your notepad out and were taking down lots of information with your coach's eye. What were some of the key learnings you took away from that experience?
I definitely did take a lot away. Like I said, the coaching staff I worked with were very, very good, and I think the biggest thing was how to prepare a team for a carnival type competition as opposed to a season. So it is. So we you have to bring the group together really quickly, and that was sort of partly my role as well, is sort of doing a bit of that stuff and driving standards that the coaching staff had set, but just concentrating on simplicity. This is what we're doing in attack. This is what we're doing in defence. And the short turnaround as well, the review preview aspect, I really took a lot away from that. All three of our coaches were, very, very experienced in that.
What were some of the things they did in that area?
The games would finish and they'd get uploaded onto a shared space. And so, Damo, who was our head coach, he sort of looked after the attack, and Pat looked after the defence, and then forwards coach Cleary looked at their set piece. And so they'd all watch the game individually. They'd sort of come back and compare notes, and then they'd identify probably one or two things in the opposition in each of those areas, and look to exploit that or things like that. So just that detail, and not trying to overload players. I mean, the type of players we had in the group were, you had your overthinkers. So you had, a couple of boys who would turn up to these sessions with notebooks and write everything down. You had some guys who were staring out the window looking at the butterfly, and then you had a couple of guys who, that they weren't writing things down, but they were taking it all in, and then you had some players who wanted to add their own 2 cents worth as well. So just that ability to be direct and concise, which I guess is a bit of a given, but watching them do that was really good. And some of the other teams in the competition would they'd go out for field sessions on their days off, and whereas we sort of focused more on the recovery and making sure the boys are in a good headspace, and getting our physio, who was she was probably our hardest working staff member. She was righto. Here's the list. Here's who's getting what, and so I think just getting them in a good headspace and that short turnaround was really important. But I mean, you learn in those carnivals too that the first game that can really make or break your week. So we played the Force.
Absolutely.
We played the Force first up, and to be fair, we probably should have lost that. And we got home, basically on full time. But after that, our week went up and their week went down, and I think they ended up finishing 7th. But that wasn't a reflection of their ability or their performances. I thought they were a really, really good side. But that first game in a carnival, you have to win it, and it doesn't matter whether it's by a point or 5 tries. You just got to get the win, and that way you're sort of feeling better about yourselves. And absolutely,
that emotional energy that you get from that.
Yeah, because it is as the days go on, it becomes, the pressure mounts a little bit that you got to win the next game. And carnival rugby as opposed to season rugby was it was very eye opening.
I think you raised some good points there, because a lot of the rep rugby I've coached while being over here in Canada it's all tournament rugby. It's let's get 4 games in a week, And if ever there's a sport that is not designed for tournament play, it's 15-a-side rugby. And I think you raised a really good point there that the focus at that point needs to be on recovery. It's you can take a team out onto a field and make them worse really quickly, but you can't make them better. You can't make them much better than what you've already got them at. So, that's a good lesson, I think, for coaches. If you are in a tournament, your work's done by the time you've got your feet on the ground. Like, especially if you've had to fly there or your bus ride, you're recovering from the very start. So you've got to keep that in mind, and the players you have and the strategy you have is what you have, and if you're going to go too hard on them, it's going to affect performance.
Absolutely, yeah. What do they call them in Canada? The jamborees?
Oh yeah, that's for the younger kids. Yeah, yeah. No, it's I've been involved in a few over here, like for senior rep stuff, and it's horrible.
Yeah.
When you play 2 games in 3 days, no one enjoys that.
Well, it's funny because the Queensland schoolboy selection system here, you play back to back 3 days in a row, and by the third day you're having to call blokes in and sit blokes out and things like that. Whereas this carnival was so good because it was play a day, rest a day, play a day, rest a day, and I think that was really good. And the junior Wallaby staff were there, and they explained the why we were doing that sort of style, and because at the getting them used to playing, and then okay, I've got a short turnaround. How do I need to individually recover and then prepare and things like that? So yeah, it was you really felt like you're in a professional system for a week, and I think a lot of the players felt that as well. But yeah, like you say, recovery just so important when you're playing short turnarounds.
For sure. All right, that's awesome, man. All right, well, we always end the show with the same final 4 questions. When you were a kid growing up in your part of the world, who were some of the players running around that you really looked up to? And
look, you're always diehard Red supporter and Wallabies and things like that. But I guess as a young halfback, there's probably 2 guys that really, I guess, inspired me. The first one was the late Joost van der Westhuizen. That I spent hours trying to mimic his dive pass. I got plenty of practice at playing behind packs that didn't quite go forward at school. So I felt that the dive pass was maybe the most effective way of clearing that ball really quickly. But yeah, I just love the way he carried himself and the way he played. And he was quite tall for a halfback, and I'm definitely not tall, but he was quite different probably to a lot of the other halfbacks around the world. And the other one was Jacob Raulini and his brother Moses. Yeah. So when they were playing for the Reds, that I was just in awe of. He just had so much flair, and his pass was just so crisp. And Dad actually played with Tito Raulini, their dad, in Brisbane in the 80s, and Dad always used to talk about how tough and uncompromising he was, and everyone respected him, but also probably feared him a little bit. Yeah. So I was always sort of pretty familiar. And then when Jacob and Moses sort of came on the scene a bit, Dad would say, "Oh, that's Tito's boys." And I remember, I think I was last year at Colts, and Jacob was about 37, 38, still playing 3rd or 4th grade for East, and he just still had it. And yeah, so that sort of silky sort of halfback skills is something I was always in awe of.
Yeah, it reminds me of someone like Steve Merrick when he was playing around my local area when I was 18, 19, 20, something like that, and he was older obviously, but you watch him play and you just jaw drops to the ground. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. And what about now? Who are some of the players you like watching run around?
Probably one guy in particular I really like is Finn Russell, the Scottish 5'8". So Finn actually played for Falkirk the year before I got there.
Right.
And I was lucky enough to play with his older brother Harry, who's top bloke. But the story goes, Finn got picked up for the Scotland under-20s almost by accident. That actually turned up to watch someone else, and they saw Finn play, and they sort of went, "Oh, geez, who's that bloke?" And one Scottish bloke said, he goes, he's everything Scottish rugby isn't at that time. They said he didn't go to a private school. He's not a big sort of gym junkie type player. Super skillful. Plays heads up footy and off the cuff, and his skill set is just incredible. And he's a very laid back sort of guy. So and I think playing in that French competition will really suit him. I'm sure he's a massive loss for Glasgow, but that French sort of style I think will really suit him. But he's someone I really enjoy watching, even if it's sometimes at the expense of a Wallaby defeat. But
they're our bogey team, man.
They certainly are. Certainly are, unfortunately.
Yeah. Cool. And what about coaches? Who are some of the high profile coaches going around that you like what they're doing?
Oh, again, probably two. The first one's Joe Schmidt at Ireland. What he's achieved speaks for itself. But I like that he had that teacher background. He went from school footy, into club and provincial rugby, and his attention to detail when you hear him speak. He's just so thorough. And I heard a story, I think, when he was first at Leinster, and I think someone gave Brian O'Driscoll a really poor pass, and he dropped the ball, and so Joe sort of rinsed him out in a video session and said something to the effect of that was a pretty poor pass. And then in the same breath he sort of went to Brian O'Driscoll and goes, but Brian, does a world class player like yourself drop a ball like that? And everyone sort of went, oh, hang on a sec. He's pretty to the point, but like I said, I just like that he's achieved so much success without having been a international or anything himself. And the other guy I really, really like what he does is Matt Taylor.
For sure.
And again, similar sort of thing. He's come through school footy into a bit of club rugby, Reds Academy, Reds, and then what he's done at Scotland and Glasgow is just incredible. And like I said before, even if it's sometimes at the expense of a Wallaby defeat, just that mentality that he's instilled in those players and the way they defend, and it says a lot about a team, the way you defend. And everyone you talk to about him just says he's just such a likable bloke. And I was lucky enough to actually meet him once when I was teaching in Scotland, and it was just before the Commonwealth Games.
Right.
And he and a couple of Glasgow players came in and spoke to the kids at school, and it was just great, chatting to him. And like I said, we sort of had a bit of a mutual mate, my sort of coaching mentor, I guess, Damien Reedy, who'd actually coached Matt at Aberdeen. And it was just good to someone that's come through as a teacher and gone on to be super successful and at the international stage. And his episode on here was something that I really enjoyed listening to as well. So
cool. He would. And I think that's what came across for me when I was stoked just to chat with him, and he was just a good bloke, and he just wanted to talk about rugby and was open to sharing. And I've shot him a few emails back and forth about some stuff after the episode, and he's been so open to sharing that, and I just think that's class, for someone who's got that profile to stay connected with the grassroots of the game. So it speaks volumes.
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool. And what about in your local community? Who's some of the people kicking around that are doing great work?
There's a couple of folks I used to play with back years ago. Created this group called the Icons Rugby, and it started out as just two blokes wanting to put a couple of sevens teams together, and then it sort of evolved into, well, why don't we use sevens as a platform to give guys an opportunity for a bit of exposure, and now it's sort of grown into, they've got their own gym and training centre, and they do a lot of mentoring and strength and conditioning, stuff like that.
Cool.
And Brisbane has just launched the Premier Sevens competition. So previously the Sevens sort of scene in Brisbane was there'd be a couple of tournaments and it was nothing really sort of formalised, but now anyone could sort of enter, but now they've formalised with the Premier clubs, 4 tournaments in a series circuit type thing, and the Icons are on that circuit now. So they're sort of, they've developed a really good reputation as being, I guess, in the know with sevens and sort of what you would call the heavy hitters, I guess. But, they're two guys, Andrew Curtin and Manuel Coleman-Ellis. They're really passionate about coaching and getting better. And, the conversations I've had with them, they go on for hours. And And Kurto's actually, I think he's still there, doing a bit of sevens coaching in Russia just recently, and he's done a couple of other sort of random gigs in Kenya and places like that. But what they've done and the opportunities they've given a lot of guys, they've been doing it for nearly 10 years now, is really good. They've had guys going and playing the Australian sevens. They've had guys playing the NRL. They've had guys play Super Rugby. And even now, when the Australian sevens might be looking at someone, they'll ring these guys now and say, "Oh, can we drop this bloke into your team for this tournament?" And so, the cool. Icons are, they're doing some great things.
That's awesome. It's a good message there too. If you want to get stuck in and advance your coaching, just build a program and make it grow from there. That's great. All right, Dan, it's been great chatting with you, and I really appreciate you giving up your time to talk about your work at Brisbane State High, and love what you're doing there, and sounds like you had a great year, and we'll be watching closely to see how next season goes, and thanks for giving up your time.
No, thanks very much, Andy. Like I said, I really enjoy every episode, and really humbled by the invite. So really appreciate you asking me to come on. So thanks very much.
Yeah, no worries, mate. It was a great chat. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review via iTunes and keep listening for the next episode. You can also follow us via Twitter at Rugby Coaches CNR or via the website therugbycoachescorner.com. Until next time, keep sharing ideas to make the game better.